taking that big picture down to really where we are today and what we can do, or what is happening in the city. It's my honor today to introduce the last speaker of this first session. Herman Brewer is the Bureau Chief of Cook County Bureau of Economic Development. Initially, he was the Director of Capital Planning and Community Development and was named Bureau Chief for Economic Development a little over a year ago, last December. He took charge of all departments, including capital planning, building and zoning, real estate, Cook County Works, community development, and this isn't all he brings to today's discussion. Prior to that, he served as Executive Vice President of Chicago Urban League, managing all the daily operations, the program areas, the Entrepreneurship Center, the workforce development, the housing, the education, marketing, communications. And in September of 2009, he acted as served as the acting president and CEO when the organization was going through a transition. Prior to the Urban League, Mr. Brewer was a program director at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, served as the director of the Chicago Working Group for that foundation, where he helped integrate the grant-making strategies in the foundation's domestic program for human and community development in Chicago neighborhoods. It was a natural development from his earlier career, steeped in community development. He served as several capacities with the local initiatives of Support Corporation, or LISC, from 1994 to 2002, and as the program vice president with the national from 1998 to 2002. He had the major responsibility for their programs in 7 cities. In this role, Mr. Brewer worked closely with the community development corporations, state and local governments, financial institutions, and foundations to secure project and operational support. His earlier career was also in the public sector as Director of Community Development for the Village of Park Forest, and as a senior planner and assistant to the city manager of the city of Richmond, Virginia. In addition, he served on numerous volunteer boards across Chicago, presently serves on the board of the St. Leonard's House Ministries on the Near West Side. He's a graduate of IIT with a degree in city and regional planning, and has done graduate work at Virginia Commonwealth University and the University of Illinois, Chicago. He lives in Hyde Park, and we're proud to have him here to share his vision of how we can build a better Chicago and Cook County. Ladies and gentlemen, Herman Brewer. Let's get you. I'll sit up here so we know everybody's name here. Oops, here we go. There's a button here. Forward backwards.
Forward backwards, okay. I'm trying to make that work. Thanks for having me, and again, really appreciate this. I see a lot of old friends in the room, so if you see the people yawning, those are the ones who do know me. I'm actually bringing you greetings and here on behalf of President Preckwinkle, who was initially asked to give this presentation. When she got the invite, she called me in and said, you know, let's put together some thoughts and talk about what we're doing, what we plan to do. So I put together some thoughts. We went in, we met, we walked through it, and I said, are you comfortable? She said, are you comfortable? I said, yeah, of course. She said, good, because you're going to give it. So, you know, I do this frequently, and she does that to me frequently. But I want to say that the previous speakers, there was some extraordinary data that they've shared with you, and I find that presentations like that make me very nervous, not only because I have to follow them, but because there seems to be a sort of reaffirmation embedded in that data that seems to say that we have entered what I call the next economy. And I know for us at the county, this has been an extraordinarily challenging time for us to reposition our work, to redirect how past practices were or were not undertaken and what should be done. But increasingly, our work in my bureau is data-driven, and we are becoming more and more aware of the sorts of things that were, again, discussed earlier. So one of the first things that President Buckwinkle did when she took office was she created this Bureau of Economic Development, and it did not exist before. I would imagine for a variety of reasons. So just to give you some background, the Bureau itself has several departments. They include capital planning, which is the architects and engineers who work for me who have the responsibility for roughly 17 million square feet of county-owned facilities. They do the renovations, upgrades, new construction, all that work. And it's about a $750 million undertaking. And I have a whopping 9 people overseeing that work. We also have our real estate division. And today we're working to secure 2 very important, one is a lease and another is an acquisition of an important parcel in West Cook. You'll read about it later, but we're very excited. So we have the real estate division. I have the planning and development division, which is our traditional HUD-funded programs. We've done some tweaking there, a lot of tweaking there, and it is no longer what I would say a traditional run sort of planning department. And I have building and zoning, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I now have a dotted line of responsibility to the Housing Authority of Cook County, which has also been largely remade, and what is now the Workforce Partnership, the City-County Workforce Partnership, which is a merger of the city's workforce efforts, the county's workforce efforts, and I have a dotted line to that now because I oversaw it when it was still under the county. Now I just sit on their board and still work with the staff and try to solve problems. But the President formed this Bureau, and she had some very strong thoughts about how things should be undertaken and brought forward. So what we've done alongside the sort of staff remake, if you will, is we've also assisted her in creating her own Council of Economic Advisors. And that group began meeting just late last year. It's headed up by the former chair of Northern Trust, Bill Osborne, who's been a long-time advisor to me personally, but also John Rogers from Ariel. And they have, of course, worked together very closely on a number of initiatives between Northwestern University and the University of Chicago, but also a number of civic measures. I, of course, became more familiar with a lot of that during the short time I was with the Urban League, and that has been a very, very interesting and influential experience for us thus far. It's really still in its formative stages. I'm going to share with you a little bit of what we are attempting to do, and a lot of the work that we've done in both working with those advisors and our staff has been done with the assistance of Metropolis Strategies, Frank Beal, and Brookings, RW Ventures, Bob Weisbord. So some of you know those guys who have seen a lot of this data before. But we've tried to look at what's the county's role within the metropolitan economy and in this region. And those of you familiar with the work of the Chamber, the work of the OECD Commission and CMAP, and all of the things that have been going on in the last 2 years are very, very familiar with some of this work. But we've tried to put into context where the county is with respect to the region's assets. Obviously, Chicago has extraordinary assets. If we think locally, I think the county itself, Cook County, is larger than 17 states. So we look at our assets against the assets of other countries, Western countries. We look at our trends, and we're very concerned about the trends relative to, I'll say, Northern Illinois, Cook County, and Chicago in particular. We've had very slow wage growth. Of course, we've had very high unemployment, notably higher than what it has been for the U.S. in recent years. And we've also experienced some decline in population. These are important measures. Now, when we look how we're underperforming against some of the major metropolitan areas across the region over what many are now calling the lost decade between 2000 and 2009, it raises concerns, and these are issues that we discuss again at a very high level. We know that there's this transformation that's underway. Again, a lot of that has been discussed in with our previous presenters, and all of you, either whether you're in the business community or whether you're in the academic community, you know that the data is very, very important. So this economy is dynamic, it's global, it's not necessarily driven by local issues anymore. And I'm going to just kind of roll through this quickly again. But we are looking at, and through the work with RW Ventures and Metropolis working with us, we're looking at how we're sort of up against other metropolitan areas. How do we compare, if you will? Well, certainly in metropolitan areas we have, as stated there, more than half the population of the country. We have 3/4 of the gross product and 3/4 of the graduate degrees. Obviously, nearly 80% of the patents and the venture capital funding is really largely embedded in these large metro areas. So we think that there are 5 drivers to a regional economic performance, and we obviously human capital is very important here, and there's been discussion already this morning about the sort of training people for the right people for the right job opportunities, and in effect helping those opportunities grow. Public and civic cultural institutions, spatial efficiencies. People need to live closer to where they work. We need to spend less time burning fuel on expressways and millions of dollars rebuilding those expressways. We need to find ways to make affordable housing available closer to employment centers. And we've got to have an innovation-enabling infrastructure. So I talked earlier about the plans that many of you in the room are familiar with. These are very, very important documents that have become familiar to our business community, and the county is trying to build on what has been done thus far. We know that the county roughly makes up half of this region's economy. We have, of course, the places of work, the population, the household income, nearly half. So the firms, 54% of the firms in this region are in Cook County. Those are important things for us to understand at the county level. This is data that's never been captured on behalf of county government, county leadership, and those administrators and people who are charged with moving the ball forward. We're hammering home this data. We're trying to get all of our team to understand who's here, who's dependent on our work, and how we can position ourselves to make these opportunities grow. So the fact that 60% of food manufacturing is in the county, freight and logistics is something I'll come back to and talk a bit about later. There are health and medical opportunities. This is a very, very exciting set of things for us to understand. So we have, one of our biggest challenges is how do we reposition the capacities of county government. It's never been at the table prior to this administration. It was, for a variety of reasons, it was something that existed and didn't contribute to moving, as I say, moving the ball forward. I'm not even sure we were doing the right blocking and tackling, if you will, to assure that the ball moved forward. So we've tried to understand, how is government a market enabler? Well, the president came in, she campaigned and said, I'm going to roll back the Stroger tax, sales tax hike. She's rolled it back. That's a huge thing. I don't know many politicians are going to roll back taxes in a time like this when our revenues are so short. But she said, I'm going to do it. You know, each of us tried to kind of sneak in and say, Madam President, you know, you might just want to maybe delay it a bit. She just stared at you, and you kind of whimpered out of the room. But, you know, this, for example, the last 0.25% that we rolled back in January, it represents about $80 million in revenue to us. So it's real money. So we're cutting. We cut about 900 positions in the first year of her administration. I've personally cut, just since October, 15 positions in my bureau. So there's a lot, and then I'm being asked to do a lot more. So those are some examples of the tough decisions we're making. She said not only is it a campaign promise, but she said we've got to learn to do more with less. We've got to be better, sharper, and just have the ability to do what we got to do. So I know, for example, when I leave here today, as an example, I can sit here and talk to a room full of very smart people, but then I might be in my office stuffing envelopes for 45 minutes, or, but I've got 2 hearings of the commissioners to attend and run today, and an appearance over at the medical campus. I got a bunch of things I got to do today, but it doesn't preclude us from having to do a lot of very basic things. So that's just kind of an example. That's her management style. That's the style that's here. None of us are too good to do whatever we need to do. So economic development programs, I talked about how we're structured. Some of the most important pieces of what we do still are trying to figure out the right formula for the workforce training and how we engage with major employers. What are the sorts of ways that we communicate back and forth? How do we assist the major employers to find those right people that you talked about? So in that transformation of the workforce, we're really going from what has been a traditional kind of workforce effort that helps those who are chronically unemployed, chronically underemployed, to looking at what are the skill sets that are out there and what are employers looking for. Are people trainable? Are there people with skill sets who don't know how to connect into the workforce? What are those jobs in those industries? These are very different questions than what have typically been asked in that sort of industry. We're looking very close at what kinds of infrastructure investments are necessary. We have kind of turned the corner, if you will, in how we manage and move our grant funds. We've historically received a lot of grant funds from the federal government to assist, for example, in community development block grant. Well, we're now trying to leverage those funds, for example, with motor fuel tax and other kinds of efforts in targeted areas to make sure we do the right kinds of infrastructure work. So there's Center Street down in the south suburbs where a number of rail-related firms and firms like UPS and others, they all empty out onto this really horrible street. It's right next to an intermodal site with Canadian National, and one day we just said, you know what, we got to fix that street. And they said, okay, well, we'll apply for this grant from the feds. We applied, we didn't get it. We said, gee, well, what do we do? Well, let's take what we already have, mix it with some other funds, and let's just do it. And they go, well, can we afford it? Oh, let's just do it. Let's just figure it out. So when we agreed to do that, it was an extraordinary response from that community, UPS, the rail companies, and others. They were so excited that we were willing to take the risk, even though we hadn't even fully identified how, cost, or whatever. We committed to doing it, and it's underway. My area also manages what we call the special purpose tax incentives for business industry in the region. So those more commonly are looked at as 6Bs, Class 7 and Class 8s. It's a complicated thing. I've got a meeting that's going on right now talking about 6 of them. I'm hoping it goes forward. Usually I'm in there cajoling and convincing the commissioners that these are the right things to do. They emerge, again, from our local municipalities. They've made their decision, their commitment to try to make those work. They move them upstream to us, and we try to move it out and assure that it happens. There are other business operations of the county that I get dragged into those meetings. I don't always understand what's going on, but I'm there, and when they pose a question to me and how it relates to what they do, so if it's the assessor, the treasurer, the clerk, the recorder of deeds, I got to have the right answer. So that so far is going well. I mentioned our Council of Economic Advisors, which kicked off in July of last year. We've had a lot of assistance in moving this forward, this kind of information. I mentioned the Workforce Partnership. This, again, is still an effort. This also happened in July. It is still a work in progress. It is considered a very successful effort. Our head of this team is Karen Norrington-Reeves, an attorney with a broad background, and both as a litigator with the Department of Justice, but also understanding workforce and many of the federal requirements around how you do workforce programs. We're now trying to go in take a broader leap and say, how do you incorporate those into meeting the goals and objectives of the private funding community? So we're in conversations now with philanthropy. I'm back bugging my old colleagues at the foundation saying, we've developed something here we'd like for you to support. We have recently taken some extraordinary steps, and I like to say our work has just begun. Next week we'll have the first meeting of the board of the first land bank ever created in Illinois. The Cook County Land Bank Authority is just about underway. We have appointed a board. It's a cross-section of folks that includes folks in the legal community, those who understand transactions. We also have folks, local mayors represented. We have folks who have been involved in the development community. We have folks who have been embedded in the open space debate across the region, as well as those from the housing and industrial sectors. Again, very, very important effort. President and one of our commissioners, Commissioner Gaynor, decided late last summer that we would move forward on this effort. We formed an advisory committee. They were given 60 days to produce a report. We met every other week. I survived it. We produced the report in December. In January, we came forward with an ordinance for the creation of this land bank. A few weeks later, we started the nomination process. We actually have another hearing on it in about an hour. I hope to survive that. But again, huge new effort we've undertaken, and extraordinary expectations about this work. And just in short, what this land bank is expected to do, working in collaboration with local municipalities and key providers of affordable housing and other kinds of services across the region. We're going to work with them to, upon request, take properties into what I call a bucket. While it's there, if it's approved for moving forward by that board, we will work to clear title, some if not all the back taxes. If there's a plan that that group brings back to us that has been approved by all of their local jurisdictions and taxing bodies, they can demonstrate that they have capital in place and a competent team, that property will come back out of that bucket, back into their hands in a time-limited way for the development to move forward. What we hope to do is shrink a period that generally takes 5 to 6 years in a very aggressive time span, and shrink that down to 9 months to 2 years to see vacant and abandoned properties turned around, again, at the request of these municipalities and their partners. That's the 25-cent version. Obviously, it's going to be a very, very complicated effort. It's going to require a lot of legal agreements, intergovernmental agreements, a number of things, if not the additional internal working agreements I have to have with the assessor, the clerk, the treasurer, and all those folks at the county who touch properties and property transactions. So those of you who pray, remember me. One other really successful effort we have just recently secured, just about a week ago. I got a call from someone at HUD in Washington, and it was about a proposal that we did back in the fall. HUD has what's called Section 108 program, which is a loan guarantee program. We did a proposal where we were targeting to try and provide capital to assist rail and rail-related companies in specific regions of the county for their redevelopment efforts. One of the things that we've seen and that I've learned since being in this job is that clearly, you know, Chicago is this rail hub for this country and has a global presence with respect to the movement of goods. But we have a number of companies in the region, and specifically in Cook County, who manufacture and deliver various kinds of parts, goods, and services to the rail companies. And so these rail-related companies have a very, very important presence in our region. And again, it's something I've learned in this job. I didn't expect to learn so much after I long past 50. But it's just been an extraordinary experience. And so we tried to capture that in this proposal. Got the call last week from the Deputy Secretary saying, you have been approved for a $30 million loan guarantee. We're going to do a big public announcement on this in about another week, maybe 2 weeks. So I've just kind of told you ahead of time. We got this money, and we're going to really work very aggressively to move it forward. I got a guy coming to work for me in about a week, and he's going to get a nice big stack of things to just spend all of his life working on. And so we're very, very excited about this. And it just, again, is another example of the kinds of things that we're being pushed to do. The data, the things we've heard here earlier, speak to why we have to have a role and why we have to be very aggressive in doing some things that haven't been done before. All of this at a point where our traditional funds from the federal government coming to the county have been decreased to date by 20%. That's pre-sequestration, whatever, I can't say that word, but pre-sequester, we already had lost 20% of our funds from HUD, just as they said, we're cutting. That meant when I came in and they asked me how would I run some of this stuff, I said, well, you're spending too much money on admin, you're paying too many people to do this work, which means not enough of it's going out in the field. And they said, well, that's interesting, but we value these people. I said, yeah, you value them, but you gotta put this money in the field. You gotta build roads, you gotta build affordable houses, you gotta do all this stuff. So when they came back with the cuts, they said, well, looks like we're gonna pay less people anyway, and this is what you said we should do. So the plan you put forward ended up getting us cut 17, 18%, but it looks like if we didn't have that plan, if we didn't say to HUD we were going to go in this direction, we would have been cut about 30%. So I'm very happy that we were able to sustain some important capital, and again, we're putting more of that out in the field. The department I'm speaking of had 70 FTEs when I started. We now have 30, and it's not just that we have fewer people. I have better people. I have been my own version of a corporate raider. I've stolen very strong and capable people who have experience at affordable housing underwriting. Jane Hornstein came to work with me about a year ago. She was one of the first underwriters for low-income housing tax credit projects. I stole her from academia. Thank you to Paul. And Dominic Tassi, he has undergraduate degree from Notre Dame, graduate degree from Harvard Business School. He had worked with our Metropolitan Planning Council, convinced him to come aboard. Maria Choka Urban, who leads my planning office, I stole her from the Center for Neighborhood Technology. She's pretty much a rail expert. I call her our rail savant. So there are a lot of folks like this that we've been able to bring in. I've brought in a couple of hotshot attorneys who really know what they're doing. We got transactions rolling. Just an example. When I got to the county, my first hour on the job, I was handed a memo from the Director for Community Development for HUD for Region 5, Ray Willis. Fortunately, I've known Ray for about 20 years, but the memo said the county has $165 million dating back to about 7 years that's unspent. What are you going to do? You've got till, I don't know, I think he said July to come up with an answer. It was April 1st. I got on the phone with Ray, begged him, and I said, just give me time, I'll put together a plan. A big piece of this was a nearly $40 million, about $35 million American Recovery Act program called Neighborhood Stabilization Program that's designed to turn around, invest in housing in areas that have been hit by foreclosure. Of that $35 million, we had spent $300,000 in 2 years. That was April 1. By October 1, we had spent $8 million. And I'm here to say that today at 1:30, we're going to move a check that will mean we will have spent all $35 million since we started in May of 2011. We've done about 47 housing developments. We've, I think, done somewhere around 200 units, a little more than 200 units. All my numbers are wrong. I just know we've spent the money, we've invested it right. We got deals that have been done in 17 municipalities across Cook County. All of them very severely hit by foreclosure. So it's new housing, some of it's rental, some of it's for sale. And we're going to do an event around that on Friday. That's just one example. We're continuing to work strategically with the philanthropic community. Again, my friends and colleagues, MacArthur and Chicago Community Trust and others have really helped us underwrite some important work, including some of the stuff I presented here. Because if you're doing these things, if you're doing consultancy in the public sector, you've got to go through a procurement process. Procurement would crush me and take 9 months to a year to really move some of these things forward. By working through philanthropy to underwrite some of that, we've been able to leapfrog that and get some important research, some important strategic documents developed for us. That is translated into the proposals that I spoke of earlier and resulted in real money coming back to this county to help us move forward. Some of the things mentioned earlier I think are, again, very, very important. We're hopeful that the financial institutions and investors in this region are poised to really work with the existing business community, help it maintain itself and grow, but also working with the entrepreneurs and these really, really, really smart young kids coming out of these universities here in Chicago. I think there's been an incredible amount of creativity and brain power that's emerged out of the universities here, and as the professor stated earlier, a lot of them, when they're looking for capital to grow, they end up going somewhere else. We got to find ways to keep that brain power here in northern Illinois. It's just so important to the future. They are the next economy, and obviously that means taking risk. And but that innovation, that investment, I think we're better positioned in a lot of the metropolitan areas across the region. Even comparable to the Bay Area and New England. We've got a lot of very smart people here. We've got a lot of experienced, really hardcore, committed families that have been running companies for 80, 90 years. Obviously, we have large corporate presence that I think can work alongside these young kids and smaller firms and help them grow. So I'm really hoping that happens. I say that because all the things I mentioned earlier really represent the risk that the county is taking. When I began a lot of the discussions around some of the things I mentioned, there were people looking at me like I was nuts. They said, "You're the county. You really don't have the capacity to do the things that you're talking about. I don't care if you were at MacArthur. I don't care if you did all this other stuff. You don't have the horses to do what you need to do." And I said, I hear you. I understand that. But I got a real tall lady who says I got to do it. So, the president doesn't want to hear the excuses. She wants to know how you're going to carry that forward. So those are some tough assignments, but they're exciting. They're very exciting assignments. People get tongue-tied reading my resume or my bio, and I go, yeah, I've been very, very lucky. But this is the most exciting job I've ever had. I don't get a lot of sleep, but it's okay. I mean, my kids are grown. Nobody cares about what I'm doing. But this is very, very exciting work. I think we're at a very important time in this region's economy. And the fact that we have the attention of rooms like this, some of the people that have agreed to work with us in the corporate leadership community, in the manufacturing community, and others in Washington and elsewhere, it bodes well. And so my team and I are really doing everything we can to take advantage of this opportunity. Don't want to end on a down note, but I do want to say that there was some discussion in the first presentation about government demonstrating stability, or the instability in government and its impact on investments made in the business community. That obviously is a very real thing, and that is something that's very important to this president. It's very important to me. And so we are really trying to not only represent the county's decision-making and investments in a certain way, we're also recognizing that the local municipalities, they don't always make the news. You hear everything that goes on with the city of Chicago because of its size. But these local municipalities across northern Illinois, many of them have already gone off a fiscal cliff. And I know that because I used to work at a local municipality. I go and meet with staff, managers, and mayors in these towns almost every day. And it is an extraordinary challenge that they have. Their revenues have been largely depleted. They're not getting transfer stamp revenues. Nobody's buying and selling properties. Businesses are going belly up. They're really in a very difficult place. And so one of those challenges for us is to find ways for the county to provide important inputs, important services, important investment opportunities alongside them. And that's one of those things that has driven me. I'm very hopeful that these communities have survived in large part a very difficult 4 or 5 years. They've got another 2 or 3 ahead of them. And I think, again, if we make the right moves and investments that support local business growth in this region, that will translate into important revenues and job opportunities for not only this region, but those municipalities as well. So I'm hopeful. I'm very, very grateful that I was asked to be a part of this panel, or not the panel, but speaking. And hopefully I didn't bore the academics. But again, I want to thank you for having us. And stay tuned. We got a lot of things we're going to be announcing from the county, and we're at it. Thank you.